the former England bowler Derek Underwood has died at the age of 78. He took 297 wickets in his Test career. That's the most of any England spinner. Test Match Specials Vic Marks, also a former England spinner, has joined us now. Vic, thank you very much for being with us. We'd just love to hear some of your memories of Derek Underwood.
Well, he was the most unlikely sort of superstar England hero. He's the most successful England spinner ever, although he bowled pretty quickly. He bowled as quick as the modern-day spinners, actually. But if you ever met him, you'd always meet him in the bar afterwards. We always used to go to the bar afterwards. He would always be there with a pint in his hand and a fag in his other hand. And if you didn't know, you'd have no idea that you were in the company of an international sportsman. He was so sort of self-effacing, and you talk to him about cricket, you talk to him about spin bowling, and he'd end up asking you your opinion as if your opinion was probably better than his, which was total nonsense. So there was a wonderful he was a wonderful character with no ego whatsoever. He didn't look like a great international sportsman. He had splayed feet that walked at 10 to 2. He was probably about 5'9", 5'10", but not obviously athletic. And yet, once he set off on that run-up, he suddenly became a world-class bowler in a different era. I mean, his hallmark was he was incredibly accurate at, I imagine, we never had the speed cameras, at about 65 miles an hour, I guess, bowling almost cutters, but very hard to score off. But then he played a lot of cricket in the age of uncovered wickets. And the pitch would start to dry and stuff would happen. And then he would be totally unplayable, bowling at 65 miles an hour, unerringly accurate. Alan Knott there behind the stumps, taking the ball that was popping, leaping. And he was devastating. They used to say, you carried him around like an umbrella just in case it rained and then it started to dry, which is very unfair on him because he got lots of wickets on good pitches as well. So, I mean, that's a quick roundup. You won't find an enemy of Derek Underwood anywhere. Captains loved him because he'd just bowl all day if you wanted him to. And the other thing that I've just been writing about him, so I've been thinking about it. I mean, he was so committed, but it showed more than anything in his batting, because when he played for England, he wasn't a great batsman. He scored 100 in his career after about 20-odd years of trying. But when he played for England, they were seeking out, in the era before helmets, who's going to be the night watchman then against Michael Holding and Andy Roberts or Dennis Lilly and Jeff Thompson. Who was the night watchman? It was always Derek Underwood. Lesser men used to hide in a cupboard about 5:30, but Derek Underwood would always be there. And there's some wonderful old pictures of him, probably black and white pictures, no helmet, leaping in the air as he tries to take evasive action, because they bowled a few bouncers even then to try and get out of the way. So all in all, he was a great bowler, but he was a lovely, unassuming, self-deprecating man who got wickets all around the world and sort of tormented batsmen because, well, even if he wasn't getting you out, you had no idea where you were going to score. There weren't quite so many shots to play then too.
Vic, Mark Ramprakash here, mate. Hope all well.
Yeah, not too bad. Nice to hear you.
Vic, I can remember the photograph. I've got the photograph in my mind now. I can picture it, both feet off the floor, the ball whizzing past his nose, no helmet on. I mean, what a job that must have been as night watchman in those days.
Yeah.
And I can tell you now, I used to have a little game when I was a kid called Test Match with little sub-butio figures, and Tony Gregg, Alan Knott and Underwood were always in my side.
Oh.
I remember the long run up and him bowling at quite a quick pace. How did he change his game then? Because he was known for bowling, and being unplayable on uncovered wickets. But obviously, you played on a few very good wickets as well.
Yeah.
How did that work as a spinner?
Well, he called himself a low mentality bowler in his typical sort of unassuming way. In that, I mean, your Middlesex captain Breers has written very interestingly about captaining Derek Underwood, and I remember in one series against Australia, Breers, on good pitches, he wanted him to bowl a bit slower. I don't think Deadly really wanted to, but he thought he'd give it a go. He also wanted him to bowl over the wicket to the right-hander, which he never, ever did in county cricket, and he sort of gave it a go. But I think in the end, they worked out that it's not working very well, and I'll go back to plan A. Thank you very much. Because he was a freak. Because I don't remember when you were playing, and even before that, you didn't find many spinners bowling at that pace. It was unusual. But he had the guts to work out that actually this is the way that I do it. And he didn't. I mean, he did try and bowl it a little bit more slowly on very good surfaces where it wasn't spinning. But he didn't like experimenting very much. I mean, I do remember, I remember playing against him when I was quite young, and I late cut him for 4. And I thought, well, that's pretty damn clever. As it sped away, 4 runs, umpire waved his hand. And I was batting with my captain at the time, who was Brian Rose, who came down and said, whatever you do, don't try and do that again. So I logged that. But then about two overs later, I was only 21. Down it came. But this was, he had a great arm ball, which was about 10 or 15 miles an hour faster, and just sort of swung in. And I was just bringing my bat down when, the stumps went, as I tried another of these lovely little impish late cuts that I was trying to work out. So, I mean, the answer to your question, long-winded, is that he did a little bit of experimenting, but it was against his nature. His main virtue was, I'm going to strangle these batsmen. And you've got to remember, all you young pups out there, there was barely a reverse sweep. There was certainly no sort of scoops over your shoulder. To 95% of the batsmen, if you bowled it on a length on off stump, they defended it. And the only person, the only person I remember sort of taking to Underwood inevitably was Viv Richards a few times, particularly in a test series in 76 on some flat pitches. And this was because Viv, this is changing, it was part of his pride that whoever was the best bowler in the opposition, clever batsmen like Ramps would say, well, I'll just ride him out, bat for 8 overs, he'll have a spell. But Viv, if you were identified as the best bowler in the opposition team, it might be Bob Willis or it might be Derek Underwood, you had to tear him apart. You had to attack him and just prove that I'm the master of the... So that was about the only time I saw Underwood really under pressure, where he would bowl probably the same length, but, in a modern type of way, Viv would go after him. I mean, it'd be fascinating to see him bowl in this era because, it's very tough for spinners with a white ball to bowl the same length, but that's what he did, ball after ball. And as I say, 95% of the batsmen, followed the rules at the time, which was if it's on a length, on off stump, you defend it and wait for a bad ball, but you never got one against him.
Vic, I just want to take you back to what you were saying about, being a teammate, and when he would sort of seek your advice on something that he was just by far and away better than everybody else at. Do you think he did that because, was it part of his character to want to involve you and to make you involved?
That's right. You know how it is sometimes when you meet someone. I mean, when I was a kid, Underwood was playing when I was 9 or 10, Underwood was playing for England, and I'd have watched him and I thought, oh, isn't this wonderful? And then, glory be, a decade or so later, you meet them. And I'm, the first time I'm feeling a bit, this is Derek Underwood. I've watched, bowl for England for the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm feeling rather awed by that. And I think there was an element of, A, he was this sort of unassuming guy, but B, he didn't want to lord it over you. Here am I with 70 test caps. Who's this young pup? He did want to bring you into the conversation and just be one of the lads there chatting away about cricket or whatever. And he had he was a bright guy, but he didn't try and give you that impression. And he certainly didn't sort of swan around because, who's this young pup? I've got 70 test caps. Why am I bothering to talk to him? He was the polar opposite of that.
There's that saying, Vic, isn't there, when people say never meet your heroes because they can often disappoint you. This is obviously the opposite of that.
Yeah. And I think, to be fair, in cricket, you're not always disappointed. Quite often you're not disappointed. I don't know what Ramps thinks. I mean, you must have come across, Ramps, some of the figures that you'd watched as a kid and then you played against them. And I'm sure some of them talked to you after a while.
No, Viv Richards was absolutely a hero of mine, and he certainly wasn't a letdown when I met him.
Yeah. Well, So yeah, it's a good saying. I think never meet your heroes, but it's not always a disaster. And it's certainly, there's two instances, and I'm sure there are many more. I remember talking to Felix White actually one point, and he said, in his new role as a sort of Radio 5 cricket man, and he meets all these great, people he followed from Tufnell. I was going to say upwards, downwards, I don't know, whichever way he would. And he said, I think they're all lovely. But he may have only been saying that, but I don't think so. By and large, cricketers are relatively accessible as modern sportsmen go, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. Vic, it's been lovely to have you on, and just to hear those stories was absolutely lovely. So thank you so much.
Cheers. All the best.
Vic Marks there with some wonderful stories. Vic from the TMS team, of course, about Derek Underwood, who has passed away. Derek Underwood, what a phenomenal player he was for England. 297 Test wickets, the most successful English spinner, and he died today at the age of 78.